Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third webinar in our series dedicated to the community-focused approaches for mental health and resilience. This is a series that Kian Foundation is hosting. We are inviting an amazing group of people who have first-hand experience in doing research as well as community-based work on activities related to mental health promotion, as well as community-focused approaches to bring community members together to address adversities and to promote resilience. I will share the recordings of our previous two talks in the chat for you if you are interested in, and this talk, similar to the previous ones, will be recorded and will be available for you for later review on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. So before I introduce our amazing guest, let me quickly introduce the activities of Kian Foundation, who is hosting this webinar. Kian is a humanitarian nonprofit organization registered in New York with the main goal of promoting health and human rights for people in crisis. Kian Foundation was initiated in support of the Women Life Freedom Movement in Iran and is named after Kian Pirfalak, an amazing 10-year-old boy who was killed over the Women Life Freedom protests in Iran. The mission of Kian is to promote health and human rights for people in crisis worldwide through education, empowerment, advocacy, and support. Kian Foundation strives to build capacity and provide access to resources and assistance to those in need, while amplifying the voices of people in crisis and fostering a culture of respect, inclusion, and justice for all. Today, we are privileged to have Dr. Eida Castro, who is an associate professor of psychology and psychiatry at Ponce Health Sciences University of Puerto Rico. Dr. Castro is a leading clinical psychologist with expertise in clinical, translational, and community-based participatory research, or in short, CBPR. Her transdisciplinary research projects focus on intersection of trauma, stress, mental health, and cancer health outcomes, with over 60 peer-reviewed manuscripts and numerous NIH-funded grants that we will learn more about them today. She is a prolific researcher and a mentor. She's leading a recently NCI or National Cancer Institute funded CBPR cluster randomized control trial aimed at promoting mental health among underserved cancer survivors and caregivers in Puerto Rico. The topic of her talk today is navigating adversity, understanding and targeting social, environmental, and trauma-related stress. Without further ado, I will transfer the podium to Dr. Castro.
Thank you, Reza, for the invitation and the Kian Foundation. It is an honor for me to be in front of the audience and just share what we have done here in Puerto Rico and also learn from all of you as well. So before I continue, I just have no conflict of interest to disclose, and I want to share with you first the objectives of the presentation. I will be briefly discussing a biopsychosocial impact of social environmental adversity events on health, highlight the role of C events or adverse events specific to Puerto Rican community and how these exacerbate stress and mental health among cancer survivors. And also briefly discuss some community-based interventions and programs that we have conducted here, and one is in the process of being developed with the community. And these are aimed to promote mental health among cancer survivors here in Puerto Rico. So just, a brief overview of social adversity, environmental adversity, and, what I mean by that when in our studies and also on the interventions that we conduct. We focus on the stressful and traumatic experiences that are rooted on the social environment. For example, like social rejection, discrimination, chronic interpersonal conflict, the economic hardship, violence, exposure to violence, disasters, and systemic inequalities. And these events have, are triggered also by biological responses, such as the fight or flight response or the activation of the HPA axis. which can lead to mental health and physical problems. So what I'm going to be presenting today is some research that we have done with cancer survivors, and how, this experiences, adverse and traumatic experience, not only have impacted their mental health, but also, how it also impacts the physical health response, the stress response, systemic inflammation, and also cancer health outcomes. And also, we know that when we're exposed chronically to these stressors, particularly among marginalized group, this also exacerbate disparities. So here, we in the examples that I will bring, you will see how the exposure to this have exacerbated disparities, specifically among those that are more vulnerable populations. So we know that us as human, we have evolved a biological system that is designed to detect and respond to social threats. And for instance, social threats such as social isolation and rejection and conflict. And the system is activated by the physiological changes, including increased inflammation, which is there because it's prepared the body to cope with potential physical harm. But in modern environments, this system can become overactive and lead to detrimental health effects. And we have seen these, for instance, in patients where you can, or people who have overcome a tremendous amount of stress because of a trauma experience, and then eventually not only he or she or they develop mental health disorders, but also chronic conditions as well. And we see this comorbidity of mental health and also chronic condition. And usually, this is also mediated by the stress responses, which is, the sustained inflammatory response that causes the stress response. So we see this a lot in not only with the people that we know, our clients, also our patients. And we know that individuals who perceive social environments as threatening are more likely to experience chronic stress, which can manifest in both psychological and physical health problems, as I mentioned. Stress and adversity also has a role in depression, particularly in how mental health, a major depression disorder may develop. For instance, like social stressors such as rejection, isolation, interpersonal loss can activate inflammatory responses in the body. And these inflammatory responses can influence the a neurotransmitter that lead to symptoms of depression, like dopamine and serotonin. So there are some depression disorders that developed not only because of the lived experience or because of a loss, but also because of the stress response are actually provoking an inflammatory response not only in the body but also in the brain. And when this chronic adversity or social adversity persists, it creates sustained inflammation, which not only has the patient or the person to have an increased risk in developing depression, but also other health issues, other chronic conditions as well. And when we think about exposure to social adversity, we not only have to think about how it was the exposure to trauma on individuals, but also when this individual was actually exposed, particularly when it is exposed in early life, during their childhood. This can be more detrimental. For instance, in this study, they found that early light adversity had the associations with inflammation, with many biomarkers that are related to health outcomes, but also to other chronic conditions such as digestive conditions, respiratory, mental health, cancer, thyroid, and metabolic outcomes. And they also found that that the effects of early life adversity not only are detrimental for adult in the health of adults, but also the stressor specific. For instance, if it's not the same when we are exposed to this adversity when we are, for instance, if it's an early life adversity, if we had exposure to neglect versus physical or sexual abuse. So the impact of those early life trauma events that may be embedded in an experience of physical or sexual abuse is more detrimental for the health of the individual, but also the health in the long term as an adult. And particularly, early life stress may predispose also individuals to an exaggerated inflammatory response in adulthood and increase the vulnerability of chronic diseases. And the timing, the timing also is very critical. It's not the same, that when the early life stress is produced or it is experienced during the clinical periods of brain development, such as in early childhood, because this one have also particularly detrimental alterations in the immune system and the stress response mechanism. So what is the take-home message in this one? Is that not only we have to be cognizant of how trauma is impacted individuals, but also our the children that are also exposed to this trauma, which are more vulnerable than being exposed in their adulthood. And so these are, just a very brief summary of the social adverse events and how we conceptualize it, and how we, this conceptualization, we have used it to do our research projects here in Puerto Rico with cancer survivors. And now I would like to share with you our story in Puerto Rico, because in Puerto Rico, we also have been exposed to adverse and social environmental adverse for a long period of time, which has impacted not only the individual health, but also the health of the population. And I'm going to be discussing these under the focus on cancer, stress, and mental health. But before that, I wanted to introduce you to Puerto Rico. Maybe many of you have heard about Puerto Rico or not, but Puerto Rico is a small island in the Caribbean. It's here. You see on the red star. This is Puerto Rico, and it is in the Caribbean Sea and also in the Atlantic Ocean. We are a territory of the United States, Commonwealth. We have been USA citizens since 1917, and the island is, as I mentioned, a small island with roughly like 3.3 million inhabitants. Most of the inhabitants live in the San Juan area, which is the capital city of Puerto Rico. About 2/3 of the population live in the capital city of San Juan, and Ponce is the second largest city, is where my institution is located, Ponce Health Sciences University. And as you see here, there is a like this green area that crosses the island. This is a mountain range, and many of the communities that we serve in Ponce lived in rural areas, in many of them that has limited access to many services and health services. And there's also families that might also be living in areas where it's hard to access, and there's a lot of poverty. These are mostly the Puerto Rico drivers of social adverse events. First of all, we as a country have been suffering a great recession and prolonged recession since 2006, and also that have led to a debt crisis, which has we haven't had been able to recover from the recession and also the debt crisis. So that what had led is to impoverish more the population. There was also mass migration of young adults that are very productive. Since we are citizens of the United States, we can easily move to the United States. So many of our young families and childrens also have moved to Puerto Rico, to the United States. So we have had like an aging population and not a lot of productivity here. And we also with poverty and there's and also, you know, not a lot of productivity, the crime rates have risen also, particularly in the metropolitan areas, but basically in the whole island. And so we live, you know, in an island where there's a lot of crimes in some areas, and recently in the past couple of years have also risen the feminicides, violence against women, and murder of women. So these are, you know, some of the adverse events that we're actually now experiencing. And as an island in the Caribbean, we also are hit by hurricanes. Maybe some of you or many of you have heard of a Hurricane Maria that hit Puerto Rico in 2017. That was it entered as a category 5 and then diminished to a category 4 of hurricane, but still it was a very potent hurricane. And it is still in the memory of all Puerto Ricans. We have natural disasters frequently. We just had the last one was just last Wednesday. We had a storm in Ernesto that hit the flooding and the rain, heavy rain hit Puerto Rico. So every time we get, you know, these announcements of hurricanes or actual hurricanes of storms that come to Puerto Rico, we re-experience the trauma of Maria, because that was a devastating trauma. Imagine being, you know, just coming out of this hurricane. There was a lot of death and losses, and not being able to communicate with your loved ones. We didn't have cell phones in many towns for months, cell phone signals, no TV, nothing to see, you know, what were the news or what happened in other areas. We didn't know. We had family members in other parts of Puerto Rico. We didn't know if they were even alive. So that was, you know, the trauma that we experienced during Hurricane Maria, and we re-experience it every time we get a natural disasters. We also had an earthquake on 2020, like a month and a half ago, a month and a half before the COVID pandemic started, or not started, but it was, you know, officially pronounced in Puerto Rico. And so you know, imagine you know, having an earthquake and people living outside. Many people lost their homes and living outside in tents when they actually announced the pandemic, and we had to be inside. So that was also, you know, another experience that we had that's still also in the memory of Puerto Rico. And so, as I mentioned, you know, these social adverse events had initially started with the economic crisis, but also it has affected also the healthcare system. I mentioned that we had a lot of young, productive civilians of Puerto Rico have left Puerto Rico to go and work in the United States, and the majority of them are also healthcare providers. A lot of healthcare providers have moved to the United States, and that means that, you know, that the healthcare system have become more fragile, not only because of the debt crisis, but also because we don't have enough healthcare providers, particularly in like some specialized health professions. And so we have a population, as I mentioned, that is aging, which is the one that is staying here, and the healthcare system is fragile. And so you see that this is a perfect storm for people who have, you know, chronic conditions or serious health conditions, for instance, like cancer patients, where you don't have probably, you know, access to medical care or specialized medical care. and you have to go outside to the United States, or maybe you have to travel long distance. Like I mentioned, we serve a lot of population that live in rural areas, so they have to travel long distance to get their treatment. And this is also part of the trauma and the stress, that are also are subjected patients or that would have chronic condition, including cancer patients. So I am going to be presenting data from three studies that have been conducted. The three of the studies we have preliminary data. These are studies that just finished a few months ago. And I'm going to be presenting, data on the impact of these events in cancer patients, survivors. The first was, we started it when the hurricane, after a few months after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. The second one was a supplement of the first one, in which we also included the impact of the earthquake on the COVID-19 pandemic. And the third is a study that we have conducted, and this one is more related to social environmental adversity, and we wanted to see identify the prevalence of of adverse events in breast cancer survivors, and how that impacted not only their mental health when they are diagnosed and treated with cancer, but also in cancer health outcomes and particularly how it impacts the tumor microenvironment and systemic inflammation. So this is data that from the study that we conducted with cancer survivors that were exposed to Hurricane Maria. And for there, this is a longitudinal study in which we follow up for 24 months. And we started doing the assessment about 6 months, 4 to 6 months after Hurricane Maria, the first follow-up assessments. So as you can see here, you can see that we assess, for instance, the symptoms of depression, anxiety, and perceived stress. We did comparison with control group, and the control group were non-cancer patients, so they didn't have cancer, and they were matched by the age and sex and also the zip code. So we wanted to see, compare to controls without cancer, how they compare in terms of the symptoms of depression, anxiety, and perceived stress. So as you can see here, cancer patients had higher depression symptoms at baseline, and also during the first 12 months. The same with anxiety symptoms and also perceived stress. So as we see that the symptoms of depression, anxiety, and perceived stress were higher than controls. And then after a year, you can see here when we did the 24 month follow-up, the symptoms diminished. And in some of those instances, it also diminished when compared to the control group. And as we can see, one explanation for this is that after Hurricane Maria, this hurricane was so devastating, there were still people a year after Hurricane Maria that didn't have, for instance, that their power was not restored. And they were still having difficult in accessing maybe services in the city. So we were not fully recovered after a year. We were slowly recovering, but not much. So maybe this is what we're seeing here is patients, particularly in we're still suffering the process of recovering from the hurricane. And so in symptoms of anxiety and also on perceived stress. Regarding the other project, this one here, biopsychosocial predictor of tumor-associated inflammation. As I mentioned, this project, we were looking at adverse events and social adverse events, and how impacted the mental health of cancer patients and breast cancer patients, and also inflammation markers. And in this one, what we did is that we assessed the history of life trauma. And we recruited 174 participants, and we have data from 118 participants. So as you can see here, when we use the history of trauma questionnaire, we assess the exposure to trauma, to traumatic events, and exposure to crime. 45.8% of the participants mentioned that they had some exposure to crimes. General disasters, 100%, of course, 100% of them, and physical and sexual abuse, all 37.3% mentioned that they were exposed to these adverse events as well. We also asked about exposure to adverse childhood events, and particularly from those that have mentioned that have been exposed to 4 events or more. We found that 45.3% had that type of exposure, and the reason why we are highlighting this is because this is what in 4 or more adverse childhood events experiences is most related to development of chronic diseases as in adulthood. So you can see here 45% mentioned reported that they had 4 or more. And also, if we compare this data with a study that was conducted in the United States that included a large sample of Latino, the study of Latino, of SOL, and that it also included Puerto Ricans in the Latino. So we can see here that that this percentage is very high when compared to that. And we don't know, we don't know if this is something that is related to the sample, or if it's in Puerto Rico that we have these higher rates. There's actually, we try to check if there was less statistics in Puerto Rico on the percentage of people that have been exposed to adverse childhood events, and we couldn't find any. So we don't know, why this is higher when compared to Latinos in the United States. We also saw that definitely, symptoms of depression and anxiety was related, or a predictor of those symptoms of depression and anxiety was childhood events, adverse events, that predicted that, as we have seen in the literature, and of course also here in our sample. We also conducted a pilot study in which we it is related to this project, and it was the predecessor, in which we took a sample, tumor sample from 32 women with breast cancer who had surgery like a few months before we took the samples. And what we found, we did the same. We wanted to see if what was the rate of exposure to social environmental adverse events, and also if that predicted changes in the tumor microenvironment, or at least biomarkers in the tumor microenvironment. And what we found was, in this pilot study, was that the increase in for the group that was exposed to crimes, had anxiety symptoms, and exposure to an adverse childhood event, that the increased tumor infiltration of B cells were significantly correlated. And these are biomarkers that are associated with tumor progression. And also, for those those that was also exposed to adverse childhood events and had anxiety, presented the highest infiltration of B cells, T cells, and macrophages. Of course, this is a pilot study, and this is what we are going to be also assessing in this longitudinal study with the larger sample, to see if this also we see these results in that in this project as well. We also found that not only exposure to particularly adverse childhood events had an impact on potential impact on tumor behavior and of course mental health, but also it predicted higher symptom burden in breast cancer survivors. Not only higher symptom burden, higher symptoms intensity, and symptom interference with daily lives. And also we found that in terms of sleep, disturbed sleep, which is a symptom that is also common in cancer patients, especially breast cancer patients also. These are cytokines that are also related to stress, are correlated and predicted also disturbed sleep. So based on the data that we gather, we developed this diagram in which we try to explain, how the data that we have how it explains the situation in Puerto Rico. So basically, the exposure to social environmental adverse events impacts the social determinants of health, leading to health disparities. For instance, we have the Hurricane Maria and the 2020 earthquake, the COVID-19 pandemic, which, of course, it had an impact in the whole world, but also in Puerto Rico, and the Puerto Rico economic crisis and the health crisis that had led to a health crisis. So that has impacted, for instance, housing security due to natural disaster, more poverty, financial toxicity, food insecurity, exposure to violence, transportation needs among isolated communities, and that in turn provokes stress, but not only the psychological stress, but also physiological stress and social stress, and that actually has an impact on the cancer burden. And when I mean the cancer burden in cancer health outcomes, potentially on outcomes related to symptom burden, for instance, or maybe also on how the cancer progresses, but also the quality of life of survivors, those patients and survivors. And then, where do we go from there? So as Reza mentioned, we have developed community interventions for cancer survivors. And so with this data, we are in the process of developing a community intervention for the self-management of mental health of cancer patients. But before I share with you what we're doing now, I want to share with you another program that we developed before we did this, we did these studies. Which was a self-management intervention for breast cancer survivors. So just to give you a brief, we all know community interventions, are designed to improve health outcomes, reduce health disparity, and also enhance the quality of life of community partners. And especially, they are designed to empower individuals and communities. So this is something very important, that the individuals and community can take control of their health. The empowerment could be achieved through education, skill building activities, of fostering a sense of ownership and health initiatives. So the interventions and program that we have designed is basically designed to do this, to empower communities and so they can take control of their health. In self-management based intervention, we leverage existing resources, community resources, utilize local organizations, partnership resources. So this is something that we are actually going to be implemented in the intervention we are designing now. And that we have also took in consideration the program that I will be sharing with you real soon. There should be a collaborative development and implementation so that we engage stakeholders, in this case, including cancer survivors, in the development of the intervention and the self-management programs. This will enhance the relevance and acceptance of this intervention. And there should be personalized, where, when we do community interventions, we know that sometimes when we design it for research purpose, we try to design materials that will appeal to the broad broad samples, but when when developing community intervention, they should be tailored to the needs of the community and also individual needs. So when we developed the first intervention, the first program, this is the one we developed before we were hit with the Hurricane Maria and pandemic in that. We had some challenges back then, and we still have them. We did a lot of need assessments, studies. Some of them I put them here, but for the purpose of this presentation, what we found was that there was a fragmented cancer supportive services. There were services in the southern part of the island, but they were fragmented. They were not communicating to each other, and not many of them were available to other survivors living in distant areas. And there was potential underutilizations of mental health services, particularly because of mental health stigma. So that was the challenges, and we're still facing these challenges. And so what we did, and back then we were doing this line of research projects. And when we are working with the community, we researchers take time producing the data to develop the intervention, but this is time that the community cannot wait. There's some needs in the community that need to be addressed right now, and they cannot wait for research to be completed. So Salud Holística para la Mujer, Holistic Health for Women, was a program that we developed here in response to those needs. Because while we were doing this research, include also the research that I just shared with you about exposure to social adverse events and cancer health outcome. Before we finished that, we needed a program, or the community needed a program where they could have not only access to mental health, but also learn strategies on how to manage the symptoms, especially mental health symptoms. So we had funding from Susan G. Komen, Puerto Rico. And for these, we partnered with support group leaders here in southern part of Puerto Rico. We have many groups of program or of services where they are support groups led by many of them by cancer survivors or maybe caregivers of cancer survivors. And they were the ones actually informally providing not only social support, but also emotional support. And when we talked to them, they mentioned that they were sometimes drained because there were some instances in where they didn't know how to provide that emotional support. And of course, because some of those patients that needed that emotional support were actually having symptoms of a mental health disorder that needed to be treated by a professional. So we did this program. We developed it. Initially, my idea was that the support leaders would submit the proposal, and I would be helping them on doing that. But they decided that we in the institution take the lead. So we submitted the proposal to Susan G. Komen, and these are the objectives as you have seen. We wanted to increase awareness about adopting a holistic health behavior through integration of mind, body, and spirit. And this is something that we came up together for this, and facilitate access to mental health services and other supportive services. We wanted to promote mental health. This program was funded for 3 years. And so what we did with this program is that we leveraged community resources and also the academic resources in order to develop these activities of self-management. For instance, we had, of course, the funding from the Susan G. Komen, Puerto Rico. We have community partners, particularly for this one, the cancer support groups. And also me being, since I am a faculty member of the clinical psychology department, we have mental health providers, and also that provided some of the workshops. And we also have a clinic that provides services in mental health. So we also have clinicians here, and holistic health providers. We have a wellness program where we did have holistic providers that we included also, as of resources. And we had in the community and also in our academia. So with these resources, we developed this program in which we went to the community and provided workshops to facilitate or to educate on how to take care of the mental health. We pay to people to facilitators to go to these workshops to the support groups. We included yoga lessons. We included workshops on nutrition, educational workshops, also on exercise, on how to do exercise, mental health education workshops, sexual health education workshops, and family support educational workshops. We also did psychological distress screening. And then when we identify survivors or caregivers that needed mental health care, then we linked them to either mental health care, holistic services, or both. And we also included a holistic health experiential one-day retreat. So we put in place this program. We have some challenges, and but I will summarize that many of those challenges had to do with stigma. For instance, when we identify survivors that needed professional mental health care, many of them would say that that they wouldn't accept the referral because they felt that the self-management strategies that were taught were enough. But we have some of them who have said that, and then afterwards they have like they didn't take the mental health services, and they had some crises, and we had to then link to the mental health care. So there was still some stigma. We did a meeting with the stakeholders, with the community support group leaders, and we came to the conclusion that one of the barriers was actually stigma. And we try to address that in this new intervention that we're developing. So this program ran for 3 years, and then the funding was no longer available. Then we submitted a grant. This is a research grant in which we for this we are developing community-based intervention and mental health intervention. It is sponsored by the United States National Cancer Institute. And for this intervention, then we are integrating some of the activities that we have developed or incorporated in the SAHOME program for breast cancer, and also from other initiatives that some of my colleagues that also do mental health research and have mental health intervention have developed, and we're integrating this in a community based intervention. So this is the intervention that we propose. We're, like I mentioned, we are in the process of developing it right now, but these are the components. First of all, this is a community-led intervention because we're going to be training mental health workers to provide informal mental health case management to facilitate, that will be facilitated by a community mental health toolbox that is going to be adapted for cancer survivors in the area of Psycho-Oncology. We are going to be providing cancer mental health promotion and stress prevention activities to communities, just like we did with the SAHOME program. And of course, we're going to be adapting it and provide linkage to mental health care. And for this intervention, we have these 3 components, which we're incorporating. It is a multi-level intervention where we are going to be impacting cancer survivors, survivors and caregivers, and also the community. And we're going to be having cancer and mental health and stress prevention community activities. There's going to be a community mental health workers informal case management. So we are going to be training community health workers on doing informal case management, and this community mental health worker is going to be paired with a clinical psychology student. So So then also clinical psychology students will have the experience and of doing community work and working together in mental health prevention with community health workers. And the linkage to psycho-oncology services will be done through this case management process, and is there, we're going to be linking them to mental health care. As we mentioned, this is a community-led intervention. So we have a community intervention team from the beginning. When we started this grant, particularly designing or adapting the intervention, we identify the community members representing different sectors. And we together are designing this intervention. We meet every month and discuss the process of developing the intervention, and we make decisions as a group. This is our first meeting. We did a team building activity where we created our logo here. You can see here we were very taking our creativity and created a logo, and from there we have been meeting, and we will meet for the whole period of the grant for 5 years. We are in the process of doing a community forum where we are assessing a community, doing a community capacity assessment, in which there are aspects of this intervention that probably might be served by other community partners. And the idea is that when it is designed and developed, that it will stay in the community and be owned by the community. As I mentioned, we on the first meeting we started planning on how this intervention will be developed and redesigned. And as always, like mentioned, always the community are included, not as partners, as equal partners. So this is my presentation for today. I am, like I said, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share this work with you. And I'm open for questions, suggestions, and now I stop here.
Thank you so much, Eida. People, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom page to ask questions, and I will read through the questions. So I have a couple of questions first. Again, I had the opportunity to learn more about this project before this webinar, and one thing that is very fascinating to me is the importance of interpersonal activities for community health workers. So basically not seeing a community health worker as a unit, as an atomized unit that is not connected to other people. And the informal case management meetings are designed to address that need. I also understand from your talk that the informal case management meeting also serve as connecting patients to the formal care through the community health workers. Can you explain a little bit further about the structure of these meetings, or some ideas or preliminary experience you had with these kind of meetings?
Yes. So the structure of the meeting we are developing with the community. But what I can say, what maybe a prototype of what could be, this could change depending on the input from the community. And just before I answer your questions, we have also in the community intervention team, we have members of community-based intervention, including the American Cancer Society. So what I envision is that, the structure of the case management will be very similar to what community-based based organization already have in place. So probably, the American Cancer Society has some sort of a structure where they train volunteers. So maybe it looks a little bit like that. So we're taking in consideration what is already there with the community, and then we will adapt it as, based on what is available. We're also conducting the community capacity assessment, and the purpose of the community capacity assessment is that we want to early when we're developing or adapting this intervention, we want to see what are the resources that the community have, so we don't have to duplicate. So maybe there is an organization that already have community health workers and they have this in place, and then maybe we can partner with them, and then use or adapt that instead of us coming up with that one. If it's already in the community and is willing and is able to collaborate, we want to honor that, not try to do our own if there's something in place, because we have to guarantee that this intervention is sustainable beyond funding period. And the only way we can guarantee sustainability is that we partner and that we do this together with the community. So in case there's part of this intervention that we stayed in the community and not all in the institution. We're part of the community also as an institution, but not all of them will stay in an institution.
Thank you. Another question I was pondering about was that you listed some prominent stressors or like common adversities that people experience in Puerto Rico. Again, they resonate very much with the context that I'm coming from, and different communities may have some common memories of these adversities. And are these specific adversities be included in the intervention? So like how to address the I don't know the memories or the stressor because of the hurricane or because of the earthquake, or the trainings and educations are mostly about the skill building generally to address any adversity.
Yes. So there is a colleague who is also a co-investigator, and he has adapted an intervention for people who have been exposed to natural disasters. And we were just talking today about it because of course he is adapting this intervention for a community community intervention, because there's we're impacting multiple levels. But we were just discussing today that not only that, but also we should also include some resources for trauma, because as you saw, there's a lot of us have been exposed to crime, for instance, and there's of course trauma, and also experiences of abuse. So that we have to take in consideration also the trauma, because this is what we're dealing with, and we see that it impacts not only the quality of life, but the mental health and physical health of our survivors.
Very good, thank you. I have a last question, which is about the definition of community health workers. So again, people define this specific role differently, and there is a spectrum of how, in varying degrees, community health workers are connected to the health systems or in the communities, or peer navigators or other potential terms. Are you limiting this intervention to a specific discipline or specific group, or people who are self-identified as community health workers, or some community-based organizations basically develop some relevant roles can also participate?
Yeah, so these are a lay community. Usually we have this program. One of my colleagues has developed also a training where we train lay community leaders. These are leaders that are already are working in the community. Most of them are lay. Maybe some of them have some health experience, but it's not required. And so we're just leveraging on the resources in the community. They're already trained. They were trained by the government. It was this program that like 20 or 30 years ago started, where they were empowering leaders in the community to address disparities. And so we're leveraging on this, they are leaders that are trained, and what we're doing is that provide them with the skills, because they already know the community, they have the trust. And when I mean community, I mean sectors of a community, particularly those that are vulnerable. And so that's what we're doing. We're leveraging on this resource that already have the knowledge, have the reputation, and know where people are, and then these are the ones that we're training.
Very good. Thank you so much, Eida. I don't see any question, but
I saw a comment here. Oh, that's
no. These are I'm just sharing some links to for people to use. I think is it okay people reach out to you if they have further questions?
Sure. Yes, sure. Should I write my
Yes,
email?
so if it is possible, we can share email. And again, we can moderate the communication if they reach out to us, but anyway, it would work. Yeah, so I have to share it for everybody, so this fades not shared to
Okay.
everybody. So let me share your email to everybody. Very good. So thank you so much, Eida. That was an amazing talk, and I am looking forward to seeing the findings of the study and how the intervention is evolving, because again, it's among the very few interventions that has different locuses of control, basically, or locuses of focus on individual, interpersonal, and community and systemic aspects. Yeah, we are looking forward to exciting findings of your study, and I want to thank the participants of the webinar. I shared the recordings from the previous webinars that the recording of this webinar will be also uploaded on our YouTube page, as well as a link to the page at Khan Foundation, which includes the link to the last webinar, which will be on September 9th. On the notion of collective resilience and how basically the mechanism and the processes of collective resilience would work. I want to thank you again, Eida, for the great talk, and looking forward to seeing everybody in our next webinar and in the future talks related to that. Thank you very much and have a
Thank you.
great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.